Good morning. Thank you again all for being here. This morning I get to share my first sermon with you. We are looking at a brief history of bioethics and what is life. I thought it was appropriate to follow on Megan's sharing on bioethics with a little understanding of what actually is this interesting word, bioethics, which so many people ask me. So we'll begin. We stand, one moment here, while I just adjust my mechanical device so that it allows me more room. There we go. We're dealing with technology, I want you to know. Okay, you'll find more of it here. Okay. We stand on the border between life and non-life, between the real and the unreal. Who will we call our progeny? What does it mean to be alive? What is a human being? What is life? From where does this all arise? What is this reality? We recall the great teachers of our civilization and the instructions we've been given by so many different traditions. Then the questions from our scientists. We have the formulas. But what makes the wings live and fly? What is life and how does something become alive? What does it take life to create life? Does life pre-exist the forms that it informs? Is form required for the enunciation of life in a given particular dimension or set of dimensions? We have the dialogues of our neuroscientists from various perspectives now. Is it the brain that gives rise to consciousness, as many believe? Or is it consciousness that uses the fabric of billions of neurons dancing in possibly 11 dimensions in our multi-cohesion brains like star clusters that give rise to consciousness? It would seem that it's all feedback loops, acting and interacting between the planes and dimensions. Then there's the heartbeat. Please, for just a moment, check your pulse. Everyone, please. I'm just wondering, just to make sure. Did we all set our beat this morning before we awoke, perhaps? Or after we awoke? In the shower or during breakfast? No, we didn't. At the very beginning of the fetus, in the earliest formation, a woman knows she's pregnant as the heartbeat begins. A living being within her. What starts that heart beating? Is it not the whole impulse of the universe? Can we not trace every single particle to its originless origins? Is anything separate? And then the heart, that first impulse of life. We know now from the research of an organization in California called HeartMath that the heart seems to have more organization and more communication with the brain than the brain does with the heart. Before two people meet, the heart begins to communicate. They've measured the electromagnetic field between people long before they meet face to face. Communication from heart to heart. What is it that's communicating? Again, we ask, what is life and what is consciousness? We can say many words, the psyche, the soul, the self, the mind itself. In Asia, when they say mind, they point to the heart. So here we are, a group of living beings in a room on Oahu together on a Sunday morning, talking about, exploring, thinking about, wondering about the concept of life. What and who are we? So for just a few moments, I'd like to take you on a journey into this thing we call bioethics. Life bioethics. What is just, what is in integrity with our biology, our life philosophy, the relationship of life to life. Bioethics, as a field, is enunciated from our children. It began substantially after World War II. It was initiated between Israel and UNESCO, which was in its earliest expression as the League of Nations. After all the travesty and criminality, the inhumanity of the research on human beings perpetrated by the Nazis in particular, the field of bioethics emerged as a recognized necessity for defining what was ethical, just, and humane as regarding human beings' actions toward each other in the field of medicine, in scientific experimentation, and in human relations and health. But actually, that terror which we call eugenics, which is again rearing its head as we enter the amazing frontier of modern new biotechnologies, began near the edges of the 19th and early 20th centuries. It has an awesome history in human civilization. So what is eugenics? It means good genes, from the Greek. It existed in most major countries of the world at this nexus, from China to Argentina, from Chile to the United States and Europe. People were deciding who should live and who should not live, who should reproduce, procreate, and who should not be allowed to procreate, our next generations. So-called authorities were making these decisions. People with less than optimum genetic profiles, genetic complications, the disabled, those with any chronic diseases, disparity, even poverty, or what was deemed mental illness. These people were considered unfit for genetic reproduction. In California alone, 200,000 people were involuntarily sterilized. So this field of eugenics existed quite some time before World War II and the Holocaust, with the extermination of those whom the Nazis deemed not in accord with their chosen racial optimum preferences. Many others than the 6 million Jews perished: gypsies, gay people, Semitic nationalities, people who didn't fit in the Aryan prototype that the Germans decided was what they wanted the whole human race alone to embody. There were actually echoes of eugenics here in the US all the way through the 1960s and 70s. One of the darkest examples was the Tuskegee experiments, where a group of African American men were allowed to progress with syphilis so that the medical researchers could understand the development of the disease unto very painful deaths when we had the medications to stop the disease. This was one of the darkest experiments. There were many other cases in question. A woman aged in her early 30s, deemed to be what the authorities, I recall it was in South Carolina, considered in poverty. This was actually very recently, only a few years ago. Without her knowledge or consent, sterilized her after the delivery of her first child. She later found out with her attempts to have another child, and the legal case went to the highest courts of the nation. This was only a few years ago. We know that in Romania, under socialism, children with deformities weren't killed, but rather placed in an isolated ward with cribs, growing up being fed but without any love or human attention and caring, not touched or attended to. When these children were found and adopted after the end of the Cold War, People tried so hard to bring the sense of humanness and love and care to many of these children who were adopted, but it proved excruciatingly difficult after they had been so disregarded in their formative years. These are very dark choices and experiments at the forefront of unethical, inhumane, and unbioethical behaviors. Many cases continue to be raised that are in the domain of both national and international bioethics committees. Torture, of course, also falls under this jurisdiction, and Abu Ghraib prison, with what our military did there, came deeply under question of UNESCO. How is our humanity called upon to behave humanly toward each other in positions of assumed or assigned authority, in medicine, in law, and as caregivers? How are we to behave toward life in all its expressions? There is bioethical ecology and environmentalism. How do we treat animals being experimented on? The field has profoundly grown in the last 70 years. So where are we now? I was privileged to attend and present at the 12th International Bioethics Conference in Cyprus this year. Topics included new biotechnologies for reproduction, surrogacy, a woman carrying a child for a couple who cannot have children, bioethics for prison populations, for refugees, gene banks, egg donation, questions of human genome experimentation, enhancement, and transhumanism, informed consent, end-of-life issues, and so many more. As we enter the newest biotechnological capabilities, we are now able to do so many things that previously were science fiction. Should a wife or parents of a young man who has perished in war or in an accident be able to garner his sperm to continue their genetic progeny? It is now being done. It has been done. What about selective abortion, cases of life-sustaining measures, allocation where there are limited resources? So many issues are there to apply best practices and highest standards. Each case is unique. We are on this amazing frontier. My friend who has joined us today told me that we have now 3D printed the uterus of a mouse and literally gestated mice within that 3D construction. We are beginning to understand how we might 3D print organs to meet the unmet need of organ donation. Many, many people die not having a kidney or a liver or some other organ. Will we be able to 3D print organs for people? A few of the international conflicts we have are currently experiencing include those around surrogacy. An Australian couple not able to have a child is able to purchase a sperm in perhaps Sweden, maybe an egg in the Ukraine with the type of appearance that they're looking for. Then they take and have that fertilized in a laboratory and send it off to an Indian woman in India to gestate. She is the surrogate. But many problems are arising. Countries are now saying, let alone the human rights of the woman and the child. Many countries have now outlawed surrogacy because there's so many health issues we don't understand. Then the children, this happened to a German couple. Germany said, this is not a German child. This is an Indian child. India said, it is not an Indian child. The German parents, it took them 2 years to be able to bring the child back to Germany. For a Japanese man and woman, they divorced a month before the Indian gestated baby was with his sperm, and another woman's, Japanese woman's egg, not his wife, was to be born. The woman didn't want anything more to do with either of them. It took the man 2 months and his mother going to take care of the child in India before Japan finally accepted the child. What about the rights of the child? All of these countries, except the US and Somalia, have signed the International Declaration on the Rights of the Child. It is illegal to buy and sell children, for goodness sakes. Is this what we're doing? India, finally now, since 2015, has finally begun to put stringent laws in place to guard the rights of women, the rights of families. Then there are many questions around our gay communities and what they can do to have children. Most countries now have deemed it acceptable if it's within their own nationality by a friend, a family member, or someone close to them, not including these huge amounts of payment. Then there's the other question of egg donation. Many of our young women donating eggs have had serious health complications. A couple will put an ad in the UCLA or even Loyola or any of the newspapers at the universities. Beautiful young woman wanted, these characteristics, high IQ, top of her class, we'll pay you $20,000 for an egg. She spends a summer taking these chemicals so that her body generates more than one egg, maybe 4 or 5 or 10 eggs. A lab collects those eggs and they are frozen. 1 or 2, maybe 3 is used for this couple who's paid her $20,000 or $10,000 or $50,000. What's happening? Aside from the question, where are all those eggs going? What about human experimentation at our top laboratories in the world? What about that young woman's health? Some women have lost ovaries, had cancer, become infertile, had strokes. Even one young law student in her last year at UCLA died from the process. Who is keeping track? Who is doing the registry of where her first genetic progeny has gone? Will she be able to find out? When I was thinking about studying this, Spirit was saying to me, they're messing with my music. It's an amazing thought, all of these complications. This is where we are now in the field of biotechnology and bioethics. It's so imperative for our ethical awareness to keep track of what's happening. For us to be responsible in this amazing world where we are. So a huge field is calling us to task of awakening to the essential questions with which we began this inquiry. What, in fact, is life? What is it that takes birth and lives through the forms in this world of our experience? How are we called to act and regulate our choices such that we can be called guardians of the life force and its expressions in our world? What will and does it mean for us to be responsible citizens of this new world of life, wherein biotechnology is challenging so many of our previously held experiences of what life is and how it arises? I certainly cannot and do not in any way present us with answers at this awesome nexus. Only perhaps we may be called to listen with a mindfulness deeper than we have ever done before, to the communication arriving in our awareness from that impulse we each share and possess, that comes to us from the wisdom of our hearts, the pulse which seems to itself have originated as we explored at the beginning of our talk today with the heartbeat of cosmos. Thank you.